Okay, so welcome everyone. This is the regular workstream leads meeting. Happens every month, but today we've opened it to the community and it's going to form the mid-PI review. I'm going to ask each of the workstream leads to present briefly on the progress of their workstream, um, what they think they'll be able to achieve by the end of the PI, and any major roadblocks and any help that they might need. I've had a number of apologies, people who can't attend today. So Paul Baker, for example, is too busy on project related to work. Similarly, Alan Kajangwe, and Sam is away on vacation. And I think that's everyone I received a note from. Other than that, I think most people are here. So we're going to go through the work streams in the order that they are published on the website. So that means we're going to start with James and talk about participation tools. Note, not deployment tools. So if
Thanks.
you wouldn't mind giving us an update, please.
Thanks, Paul. Can I just share my screen?
Please do.
So participation tools first, yes?
Yep.
Okay.
I know we often get the two mixed up,
Yeah.
or I do.
Let me just make sure I share the right window here.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Let me just make sure I can see my notes. So participation tools workstream. We have a working document where we take minutes of all our weekly workstream meetings. There's various links in here as well to the diagrams and sub-documents that we're working on. At the start of the PI, we set ourselves a number of objectives. You'll find them listed here at the top of the document. Number one, priority was to complete the refactoring of the MCM participation, onboarding and connection management workflow tool. Really, there were two things that we needed to achieve there. One was to allow it to be hosted in non-IAC based environments, even though IAC is the kind of recommended preferred way to deploy major league in production. Not everybody uses IAC, at least right now. And it's definitely useful to be able to, not only useful, but necessary to be able to deploy the MCM components without doing a full IAC deployment, just even for testing and development purposes. It was all a bit clunky. Yev, who is on the call today, I see, has been working away diligently on this over the last few weeks. So there were a number of things that he's been working on. One was removing the last remaining vestiges of old code relating to the WSO2 API gateway integration and replacing that with the now standardized IAM system that we deploy in IAC, which is Keycloak. So the OIDC, the OpenID Connect stroke OAuth 2 authentication flows are now fully supported in MCM. There's PRs raised on that; it's almost complete. So I am predicting that that work will be complete by the end of the PI. There is also an adjacent piece of work there to embed the state machine that manages the client side, the DFSP side, a series of tasks required for onboarding and maintaining the security of a connection to the major loop switch over a period of time. It's managed in a finite state machine. If you don't know what one of those is, just go and ask Google. It's a computer sciencey term. It's a way of keeping track of the progress of the various tasks related to onboarding, exchanging public keys, etc., creating user accounts. So it handles automation of a lot of those manual tasks. onboarding. Moving on, we now have a Docker Compose version of Payment Manager. Previously, the only way to deploy the Payment Manager participation tool, DFSP side participation tool, was using IAC and to deploy it using Helm into a Kubernetes cluster. But during our early analysis in the work stream, we realized that that's possibly only high-end DFSPs who will consider deploying their integration layer like that. And smaller guys will want to be able to deploy a much smaller hardware profile with less tooling complexity, less of the enterprise grade kind of orchestration that you need with Kubernetes and the associated skills that you need to have in your organization to run and to install and use Payment Manager. So having this Docker Compose version reduces that overhead considerably. So you can now run all the Payment Manager toolset without needing Kubernetes. So that enables that tool to be used by smaller DFSPs. We're a considerable way through the kind of task list for finalizing the adoption of that Payment Manager code base into the Mojo Leap stewardship. It is an open source project anyway. It has the same license agreement terms that Mojo Leap does, but it's going to be managed and overseen by Mojo Leap Foundation. But in order for that to be the case, it has to meet certain standards in terms of the test coverage, the documentation, etc. So considerable progress has been made by members of the community to bring that up to a standard where it can be officially adopted by the foundation. That's well underway. Unsure whether that will complete before the end of the PI, to be honest, but we're aiming for it. And our lowest priority, kind of a set of background tasks that we've been working on, is to just generally improve the packaging around the solutions for onboarding and connection management for DFSPs. A significant.
Is that lowest priority, or is it just the ultimate target of 1 to 3?
Well, yeah, I suppose it's the ultimate target is to have a set of kind of shrink wrapped off the shelf tools. At the moment, there's a number of solutions spread across various repositories on the code, but we wanted to make it more obvious what those tools are and how they can be deployed and how they fit together to make a coherent set of products. So we do actually have some documentation published now that I will show you quickly. So in this part of the Mojo Leap documentation website, the product documentation, if you go to docs.mojoleap.io, you'll find these top level headings now. If you go to product, you'll see, where is it? I'm getting
Click on deploy.
Yeah, I don't think it's
we haven't incorporated the participation tools aspect into this yet. It's that you're thinking of the deployment tools.
You're right, Paul. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah. I'm ahead of myself.
That's a target for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so we have this feature matrix which lays out the different characteristics of the options, the deployment tools that we've been working on as well. And this will be published in the hopes that
participation tools.
Yeah, that will be published soon in the hope that it will guide people towards the kind of jumping off point for each one of the solutions and help people understand what meets their needs the best.
Julie, you've raised your hand. Would you like to ask a question?
I do have a question. So now that the onboarding the FSP study has started, how are you planning to check that the requirements are captured with the Excel spreadsheet? Is it part of the workstream activity to take into account the feedback received during the study and update the features?
Well, somebody needs to do that work. I don't think we've identified who's going to do that work yet.
Okay. So perhaps it's a discussion for the workstream directly.
Yeah. If you want to discuss that,
Yeah.
then yeah, come to the workstream meeting. Yeah, definitely.
It needs to be addressed, but it hadn't really been considered because it's been developed as a separate activity almost. But Julie, you're quite right. It needs to be addressed within the work stream.
Okay.
James, anything
Yeah.
else?
So no, that's where we are at the moment.
Good, thank you.
We expect our top two priorities at least to be complete before the end of the PI. These two are at risk of not being completed before the end of the PI, but resources are always limited.
Yes, it's a fact of life.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, James.
Okay.
The next one on the list is the complementary workstream, really, participation tools for fintechs, which aims to do something similar to James's workstream, but for fintechs using the PSP interface. And this is being led by Alan Kajangwe of Wired-In. Wired-In are based in Rwanda, and they work very closely with us, which Alan was unable to attend today because he is working, well, Wired-In are very closely working with us, which on the migration of P2P to the merger loop deployment, which is supposed to be finished, I thought, by the end of May, but no, there you go. As a consequence, there's been very little work on this particular work stream. And Alan tells me that they've been discussing with RSwitch on how to take the best approach to minimize the integration work with PISPs on one side and the payment aggregators on the other side. They've developed a design for an SDK deployable for fintechs, and there's been some mixed reactions from fintechs that they've received, but most are gravitating towards the design that has been developed by this work stream. They hope to be able to start it soon, but they haven't as yet. So that's somewhat frustrating, but as we said, we're always resource constrained. So that's the reality of the world we are currently living in. So moving on, the next one on the list is back to James with deployment tools this time. The other work stream that we always get confused about. So please, James, over to you.
That's cool. Right, deployment tools. In a similar way to participation tools, we have a work stream working document with minutes about our weekly meetings. So we've done quite well in this work stream so far. These were our PI 27 objectives that we set. We wanted to publish IAC documentation, a more updated and useful set of documentation for IAC. We wanted to publish the feature matrix for deployment tools, which is the one I was mistakenly talking about earlier. And we also set ourselves a goal of documenting any missing features and missing deployment tool features that we think we need as a priority. Number two has been accomplished already. The documentation has been published here. Where are we?
Click on deployment guide.
Oh, yeah.
Just below
that. My apologies. Yeah, here we go. So here's our deployment guide.
And it talks about, well, I'll let you talk about it, James.
Yeah, this guides people from their kind of who they are and what their objectives are. It's just basically a 2D matrix that guides you towards a particular tool chain for deploying Major League. And there's more details published about each of the mechanisms for deploying and the various SLAs, etc., caveats and assumptions, guides to the documentation, for example. So the idea is it should now be much easier for people to figure out how to deploy Major League in the scenario that suits them the best. So ISE documentation, that's still top priority for this workstream. We have a contract technical author who is well known in the Major League community, who has been working with the ISE engineering group to improve the documentation around ISE. We have an awful lot of meeting notes. This has been a very active work stream. There's lots of things we've identified that we want to do. We've defined a new structure for the documentation, a new set of objectives for the documentation. Currently in progress are a set of interviews by the technical writer with the engineering team to try and build the full set of documentation. The documentation is designed to cover, let's see if I can find it in the notes. It's designed to cover the architecture of ISE from a technical perspective, as well as the feature set. So not only will it give you a how-to guide as to how to deploy Major Loop using ISE, but also explain the architecture and the structure of the code and some of the design rationale behind the tool chain, but also the architecture of the infrastructure that it deploys, why it's structured like it is, the various functional and non-functional requirements of a production-grade Major Loop switch, security, performance, resilience, etc. So that's a very, very big task to build that documentation. It's likely to take many weeks before we have the first draft, but it is underway and prioritized. Will it be complete before the end of the PI? Highly unlikely, and it's likely to be ongoing, like I say, for quite a few more weeks. Any questions, comments from anybody before I hand back over to Paul?
No questions from anyone? Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you, James. They are two very high priority work streams for us, making it as easy as possible for people to deploy in the environment that is appropriate to their needs, and at the same time making it as easy as possible for DFSPs of various sizes and levels of sophistication to onboard themselves to a modular deployment. So obviously getting those right and as simple as possible is extremely important to our overall mission. So thank you, James.
You're welcome. I just wanted to point out that the links to these workstream notes documents are pinned in the Slack channels for the workstreams. So if you find the Slack channel, look for the pinned posts in there, and you'll find a link to the documents.
Great, thank you, James. And I should point out that on the Community Central website, if you go to look for the workstream status, you can find the links to the Slack channels there. And I'll show you the Community Central website later on in this call. We're going to move on now to the next workstream, which is the QA framework for adopters. And this has been led by Moses Kipchirchir of KPMG. This is a new workstream, and KPMG are leading on this. And to me, it's a very important work stream as the motor loop community and our adopters reach a degree of maturity. We need to be able to verify that a deployment is being deployed correctly and that it is meeting the security and operational standards that we would expect from
this is fine.
deployment. So
We can live with this because we're gonna finish the house.
Just if I could just mute Innocent for a moment. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Moses. I can see you're online. Would you like to take over and give us an update of where you are and where you expect to be by the end of this PI?
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. I'll give an update first on the workstream itself, its objectives, what we've done so far, and the plan for completing our deliverables for the workstream.
I can ask nothing more, Moses. So that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So as Paul mentioned, we are leading a quality assurance framework for Moja Loop. The framework will help the community to be able to validate configuration, functionality, security, and other areas, just to help adopters to have confidence that the system has been deployed properly and any risks are identified early whenever the assessment is done. So that's why we're coming up with a framework that then the community can use for the purposes of assessment of the quality of the system. The objective of the framework first will help adopters they can self-certify, certify the application or systems, or they can get third parties to use the framework to then conduct the quality assurance. We have had one meeting so far to come up with, to obtain an understanding of Moja Loop, the system, our involvement with the Moja Loop team also, to understand the deployment approach, which I think we've been discussing through these meetings. And out of that meeting, we've then come up with a work plan for delivery of the QA framework. At this point, one of the first things we did was to have that meeting. At this point, we've sort of crystallized a plan for the delivery of the framework, which tentatively we do expect that the framework should be ready by end of July. One of the key pillars for delivery of this framework is stakeholder engagement. And that means beyond the initial meeting that we've had with the Moja Loop team, we also want to involve adopters and other members of the community first to come to an agreement on the scope of the framework. Like I said, some of the key pillars is functionality, there is performance, there's configuration, there's security, there might be privacy. So to come to an understanding of what are those areas we are looking at that will be part of the framework. Then we will go ahead and develop then the components of the framework. We also have another meeting with relevant stakeholders to review the documents, to review the tools that we come up with, and then these will lead us to then adoption. Starting next week going forward, we will be setting up meetings, especially with the Moja Loop team, on a bi-weekly basis to check the work stream and where we are. And based on those meetings, then we will decide which stakeholders then we engage on an ongoing basis. I think, Paul, that is a summary of where we are, what we've been able to do, and I'll just welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Moses. My main comment was going to be, can you set up those weekly or fortnightly meetings? And you've already addressed that, so great. No, I'm happy with that status report, so thank you. Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to make? No, but I think that Moses, I think you're going to get most of the comments through those regular workstream meetings with the Modular community. So I think that would be the most valuable thing you can do.
Yeah.
So please go ahead with that, and we can take it from there. And out of that, we can also set up any specific in-depth calls that you want to have in order to progress your work.
All right.
Yeah. No, thank you. That was a good update. Thank you. If there are no other comments, I will move on. The next work stream is actually dispute management, and this is being led by Professor Shinwei from Wired-In, or I think he's actually Arswich. I heard yesterday, I think Manzi told me that Professor is actually away on vacation, so I haven't heard anything from him directly, but I will pursue him separately after this call, and I'll update the Community Central website accordingly. Okay, the next one is PISP 2.0, and this is being led by Paul Baker. Paul told me that he couldn't come today. He had project meetings to attend, which is fine, but he did give me an update on this work stream. There's still continuing design work here. The existing design work that is in place is being extended to support for PISP and fintech notifications. There has been good progress on that design work, and it's on track to have a complete design in place before the next convening. However, there has been no progress at all on implementing PISP 2.0, and that's because we simply haven't had the capacity. Paul himself is in a position to manage the lead on the design and coordinates activities there, but he doesn't have any capacity to do any of the implementation. And I have reached out to a couple of people to see if they can help support on that. And there's I see a couple of those people on this call. I won't highlight your names as in this context, but if you want to reach out with any questions, I can put you in contact with Paul. And I know that you've all been added to the regular PISP workstream calls. The other important thing to note is that PISP notifications have been broadened to include not just those that relate to payment initiation, but also to include account information, so information on balances and any other data relating to an account. And it was agreed at the call, which I think was yesterday, that this should be based off a standard ISO 222 message. So, yeah, there's a lot of work in place. All the design work is in place. We just need people to lead on the engineering side of it. So hopefully we'll get good news on that soon. The next work stream is LEI addressing, and that's being led by Claire Rowley from Blythe. Claire, we just had the work stream meeting. Would you like to say a few words today?
Thank you, Paul. And very good to see everybody and some faces, as Paul said, just to brief us in the workstream meeting. I'm just going to share the workstream definition documentation, and I will highlight where we focus right now, which is this phase 1. So developing what is the process for the capture of the LEI, where the merchant already has the LEI, some of the advantages that come with the integration, the LEI, that is, for example, the pre-fill of the merchant record, as well as a possibility to enable automated update alerts in that longer term. And then the last piece here in phase 1 is demonstrating the end-to-end payment inclusive of embedding the LEI into the QR code in customer app. So what we are focused right now, it is finalizing to the process flow, the analysis of the merchant registry, and potentially suggesting some additional attributes for the schema based on the information in the global LEI system, which could bring value to the DFSP and generally the Mojaloop ecosystem. And then we need to do a deeper focus into this demonstrating the end-to-end payment and how we're going to do that. I just take a pause there and see if anybody that was just in the workstream meeting as well, if you'd like to add anything to that summary.
I think all I would add is that we are definitely iterating towards a viable solution. I'd also highlight the fact that life. In fact, would you like to show those files showing show those slides showing the difference in terms of the merchant registry data versus the data that Glyph holds, and also the validation checks that we might be able to avail ourselves of when we're carrying out a merchant registration. I thought that was very useful. So.
Okay. Give me one moment. I just pull the file. Okay, right here. Okay. So let me just share the screen here again. This one here. Okay.
Yes,
is everybody able to see Glyph assessment of merchant payment docs?
Yes, we can see it.
Terrific. So one of my colleagues developed this assessment using this source at the bottom, coming from the GitHub of merchant payment docs. So he conducted assessment of common fields we have across the Mojaloop data to the LEI data. So importantly, we both have information here on entity name. We also have information on addresses. You see the different elements here, as well as some information on geocoding. So when we talk about a benefit of a pre-fill of a merchant profile, when the LEI is presented as a merchant identifier, the information in this column is what you could, apologies, in the third column, is what you could consider a pre-fill for consideration by the merchant, rather than the merchant manually typing this in and possibly then having some manual errors. Then we did also the assessment of maybe where there might be some interesting additional data in the global LEI system. So in particular, the registration authority and the local company number. The registration authority, this is the business register, the tax register, whatever is in the jurisdiction, the authority where the business creates its profile. And then another area here, indeed, we talked also about the country and subdivision and the ISO standard that is followed here. A last one would be the entity legal form. This is another international standard which describes the different legal forms that are applicable in the jurisdictional law of the particular nation or state. And I think we concluded that the other two, entity status and entity creation date, we do have a commonality between these. And then the last thing we discussed, in addition to just having that concept of pre-filling data from the global LEI system, possibly adding some additional attributes to the merchant registry, there could also be an opportunity for the merchant registry to leverage some of the data quality checks that exist within the global LEI system. And this could be applied broadly for all of the records within the Mojaloop merchant registry. So my colleague Shouty extracted some checks that are relevant to entity names and to entity addresses. So for example, I just give you the first one. We have some checks that check, does the name seem plausible and is it present? So for example, if the name was just filled with 100 characters, all of them being X, it would flag this particular data quality check. We do have several checks about language. So when the entity creates its record within the global LEI system, the name comes with a language tag. So there is some checking to ensure if there's consistency. Maybe this is something interesting for longer term to explore. And then we think there's maybe several checks around the entity address, which could be very interesting. So for example, with the leveraging of the ISO codes, ensuring that the country and the region information is correct, that postal codes are matching the country's prescribed format. And then also, detect implausible city names. So looking at where there is variations in the same city name across records and ensuring some consistency there. So this would be an opportunity we can explore it further. It would not apply just to the merchant data that has the LEI, but a merchant registry could have access to the quality facility within the global LEI system and apply these type of checks at some frequency if that would be desired. And Paul, you like to add anything to that?
No, I just think this is it's obviously not in the first iteration, but I think would be very valuable to evaluate how we might apply these in order to improve the quality of the merchant registration data we capture. And also, we are very aware that in other services which facilitate merchant payments, there is a great deal of fraud and money laundering that goes on, and these checks are checks that would help to identify that. And we need to have active checks, not just of transactions within the Mojaloop hub, but also of registration data. A common one, for example, is where you find 50 merchants all registering at the same physical address, or a physical address which isn't actually a merchant premises, for example. These are all things that this data can be used to validate. And we need to have those checks ultimately within a live merchant registration deployment. So yes, I think it's potentially very valuable. Thank you, Claire. Does anyone on the call have any questions for Claire? No? Okay. Well, thank you, Claire. That was a very useful update. Thank you. Okay, so I'll move on to the next one now. The next work stream is actually bulk payments, and this is a work stream that we have in place because although we have a perfectly functional bulk payments capability at the moment, it's not as efficient as we would like it to be, and we've identified a number of changes that need to be made. It's a refactoring of the existing bulk payment implementation. It hasn't yet begun. Again, this is one that's being led by Paul Baker, who is not available today. But this is something which could become a priority very quickly. So, as I say, all the design work has been done. We just need somebody to pick up the engineering side of this. And when we have an adopter that wants to implement large-scale social payments, we're going to have to take on this implementation potentially at very short notice. So just to highlight, if anyone is looking to help on the bulk payments refactoring, your assistance would be very welcome. The next work stream is actually ISO 222 refinement, and in this case, the delivery of a working market, an up-to-date and acceptable market practice document, and also registration of the different message types with ISO. Michael, would you be able to talk about this?
Nothing would give me greater pleasure. So we have a draft market practice document, which was developed by the implementation team for the COMESA DRPP project. That's currently being reviewed. Obviously, we will expect a generic Mojaloop market practice document to be somewhat different from that, but I think it provides a very good start, and my commendations to the Infotex team for producing it. I think that reference has been circulated. If anybody else wants to see it, then let me know and I will give you the reference to the document so that you can comment. We've had a set of comments from the Wired-In team in Rwanda, extremely interesting and well thought out comments. So if we get any more comments, then the next thing we will be doing is putting together a special interest group meeting to discuss them and to see what we want to do about the changes to the market practice document. So that's that side of things. As far as the messages go, there are two changes recently. First of all, we have requested a change to the existing FI to FI messages, the ones that we use in Mojaloop to manage currency conversion. The problem is, or was, that the messages we wanted to use did not contain information that enabled us to store the different currencies, the exchange rate, or the costs associated with it. So we've put in a request to change those definitions to include that information. Fortunately, we were able to meet the deadline for this year's maintenance cycle, so that's good. The new messages, the messages governing the agreement of terms, both for currency conversion and for payments, that request has now been submitted. That works on a slightly different timetable from the standard ISO 20022 change requests. So that can happen at any time. But we are waiting for an evaluation, and hopefully that will go forward for discussion and adoption. So I think the only outstanding question at the moment from the ISO 20022 standards organization is whether we should look to include the geolocation, which is currently part of the FSB IOP API for payments, but is not part of the equivalent ISO 20022 messages. Now, as far as I'm aware, no implementers are using geolocation, so it's not an urgent question, but it is at least potentially an interesting piece of information for payments that are made using mobile devices. And I suspect, therefore, that we should ask the ISO organization to include that in the payments definition messages. So that's roughly where we are on ISO 20022. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask on that?
No questions from anyone?
Okay, in that case, I'll hand back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Michael. And the next work stream is Mojaloop Evolution, so I'll hand straight back to you, Michael, and James, whichever you wants to lead on this.
Sorry, Paul, would you say that again? I just
Mojaloop Evolution.
Evolution. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Just dig out the document and share my screen again. Okay, this work stream is focused on the future of Mojaloop from a technical perspective. The future of the code base, the future of the architecture. The work stream has a current top priority, which is evolution of the core ledger away from the current traditional SQL DBMS based ledgers in MySQL towards the Tiger Beetle ledger technology. I'm guessing everybody here will have heard about the Tiger Beetle integration effort that's been going on. If not, where have you been over the last year? That's still very much the number one priority for the workstream. Lewis Daly from Tiger Beetle has been working hard and diligently with Michael Richards to to attack the problems from several directions. Firstly, the accounting practices that will be implemented in the tidal beetle ledgers, the chart of accounts, and how the modular clearing and settlement functions will record the movement of funds across that chart of accounts. Work to define that is approaching finalization, I would say. I'll let Michael give maybe a little bit more information on that if he likes in a minute or two. But Lewis has been fast building code to build proof of concept for the integration, which has already been run and demonstrated significant performance improvement over what we have, what we've seen so far. So I mean, you know, it's just a couple of numbers here. Don't read too much into these. 21, 22, 23,000 transactions per second Lewis has achieved on a very, very limited test machine through some kind of minimal proof of concept of the ledgers. So the significant performance improvement that we've been hoping for still looks quite possible. I don't want to count our chickens before they hatch, but it's looking very promising. In terms of timeline, we're kind of hoping to do a demonstration at the virtual convening in a couple of weeks that will hopefully show a working version. But there's still a considerable amount of work that's required to bring out to the equivalent production quality that we have currently with the SQL-based ledgers. So there's a risk that we won't be complete by the end of this PI. The more realistic estimate is that the first kind of production official release of Mojo Loop with a Tiger Beetle core ledger will be end of Q3, early Q4 this year, 2025. That's our current estimation, but as you know, estimates in software and engineering can be well inaccurate. Michael, did you want to give an update on the work that's been undergoing, that you've been undertaking for the chart of accounts and the accounting practices?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. So this is in some ways, it's something that doesn't really have very much to do with the evolution work stream. Essentially, the proposal is that we should change the existing ledger structure, which was, I don't think I'll be treading on people's toes if I say, was basically developed by engineers to solve engineering problems, to replace that ledger structure with something which will clearly represent to accountants what's happening inside a Mojo Loop scheme. This is a useful project, and it seemed to us a sensible plan to integrate that with the Tiger Beetle work, because that was going on at the same time, and it means that we can essentially move the two things at one time. We have an team accountant who's been helping us out with this. It's basically the team that's been working on it is myself, Miller Abel, and Robert Ron, who's a professional accountant. As I think both Paul and James have said, we expect things to be solved really quite soon now. But on the other hand, we've been expecting that for some considerable time. So I wouldn't necessarily hold your breath. But I'm sure that when all the issues are resolved, following which, of course, they will need to be mapped back onto the Tiger Beetle operations. And in particular, we need to make sure that whatever solution we have does not impact performance, the performance of the underlying Tiger Beetle engine adversely. So there will be a second phase of work once the accounting model has been agreed to apply that to the way in which Tiger Beetle works to ensure that we get the accounting information we need, and at the same time everything works with the efficiency we also require. So that's what's going on there. The other point I want to bring up to add to that is to go back to the numbers that James was looking at, the 21 and 23,000 transactions per second. Those differences relate to a question that Lewis and I have been asking ourselves, relating to how we manage settlement. Now, the original settlement V3 definition basically revolved around taking separate copies of each transaction as it completed and adding those to settlement batches, which is obviously a relatively expensive thing to do, both in terms of processing and in terms of storage, because essentially it means we're storing 2 copies of each set of payment messages. We looked to see, Lewis and I, whether we could manage something which would enable us just to tag payments when they were completed with the settlement batch that they belong to, and to use range queries against those tags to abstract information relating to the total amount in each batch. The figures that you see there on the screen, 23,000 is an example of throughput without queries running in the background, and 21,000 is an example of transactions running with queries running in the background. So essentially what that says is that although there is a performance penalty associated with running queries against the Tiger Beetle database at the same time as you're running hot doing updates to it, it's not it's of the order of 5%. And that may be something which is a burden worth carrying, because it will, as I say, significantly reduce the cost of maintaining settlement information in a Motion Loop system. So that's hopefully another extension that we will be making as part of the Tiger Beetle implementation, which will mean that Motion Loop is both more efficient and simpler to implement at a relatively minor cost in terms of maximum overall throughput. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Apparently not.
I will take that as a no.
I look forward to you actually presenting some of that, the work on the accounting model at Product Council sometime soon, because, well, I personally think it's fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of other people would as well.
Absolutely. There's nothing more fascinating than an accounting model, I always think. Julie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, indeed, it was also like my question. I think I pinged you last month. I'll be keen to see the accounting entry as well.
Oh, sorry, did I not respond to that? I will try and berate myself and get you. Actually, probably the easiest thing, actually, now Warren Carew has done this, is to, and this is essentially Miller's project, so it might be sensible for you just to write to Miller and say, can he include you? And I'm sure he will. That might be a better, more, how can I say, a more polite way of doing it than for me to give you access. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'm happy to do it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, we only have one more work stream to cover now, because the usual updates on platform quality and security and core and releases are not going to happen today, because Sam is away on vacation, and he has promised he'll email me some updates soon, but I haven't received them yet. So the last one is performance and the performance white paper. So Julie and James, perhaps between you could give us an update here.
Yeah, sure. So the performance workstream is currently, has been defining a set of performance tests to run through the latest release version of Loop. It's a very comprehensive matrix of tests and use cases and configurations that we want to performance test with a view to collecting data to put together a white paper jointly with a number of partners. AWS has graciously given us a sizable chunk of credits to run performance tests on cloud deployed version of Loop. We also have an on-premise lab that we're going to utilize for running performance tests as well. So hopefully we'll be able to collect a lot of data points to feed into the white paper. Hopefully at the end of the PI, we have a project plan and a schedule. So far we're on schedule, but there's a lot of risk associated with setting up and executing the tests because there's a number of unknowns right now that we're kind of tackling. However, everything's looking okay at the moment. We expect the tests to be starting pretty soon. We're just in the process of deploying the first couple of labs onto AWS right now and setting up the hardware for the on-prem lab. That's all well in progress, well underway. So fingers crossed, by the end of the PI or shortly thereafter at least, we'll be able to publish the data and some kind of conclusions and some cost modeling to share with the whole community. Julie, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you summarized it pretty well. So thank you for this. Yeah, so as I think the only thing you didn't mention, or perhaps I missed it, is the planned publication date for the white paper. So right now we are targeting end of August. August, sorry, actually beginning of August.
So is that beginning or the end, Julie?
End
End.
of August, I think. Julie said. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No,
Does
sorry.
anyone have an...
Sorry, beginning of August. Apologies.
Oh, okay. Great.
According to the plan. Apologies for this. But I said end, but it's beginning actually. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, great. We are slightly over time. Just to let you know, I will be publishing summaries of these updates as soon as possible on the Community Central website. I'll publish a link to that in the Product Council Slack channel, and I'll also be publishing the recording of this session later today. So thanks everyone for your updates, and thanks to everyone else for taking part and your engagement, and look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.